Welcome back to the Quilty Little Christmas Quilt Along. We are on the week of August 22nd. We'll be finishing off the Quilty Wishes. We're going to work on ornament number 3, the tree, the 2 filler blocks, borders, and finishing. And then after that, next week, we're going to work on gingerbread cookies. I have all my fabric and batting ready, fusible on the back per the instructions, and I've also prepared my binding, my borders, and my backing. Ornament 3 is very similar to ornaments 1 and 2. Let's go through our thread selection. I have cream. And this is the Sim Thread brand that I purchased online when I first started embroidery. I have a lot of colors. Olive green, red, pink, and forest green. I have a 5x7 hoop, light mesh cutaway loaded, hand tightened, screwdriver tightened. Let's head over to the machine. Before I load my files for ornament 3, I need to think about my background quilting. I'm using my own background quilting. I'm looking through my blocks. The 2 little snowflake blocks on the side, I used the little snowflake pattern called Winter. Ornament 2, I used Christmas trees. In ornament 1, looks like I also used the winter. So I want to pick something different here, but I also want to think about the filler block down here. For the filler block, I really want to use the Christmas trees again that I used here in ornament 2. I think I'm going to use a simple loop design for this ornament. I'm going to bring up my files. They're on USB. If you're using the background quilting per the bundle, you need KDQ 345 Wavy 9 4x4 design. So I need 4x4. And I decided I'm going to use the loops. A very simple background design that came with the Clear Blue Tiles Essential Set, 4x4. Go ahead and set that, and then we're going to add our Ornament 3 embroidery file. That looks good. You can see some of the loop outside of the ornament. That looks nice. We're ready to go. This block is very similar to ornaments 1 and 2. I'll move through the beginning fairly quickly. We're going to do a batting placement. Place our batting, do the batting tack down. You'll trim off the excess. Then there'll be a fabric placement line. You'll put down your fabric. There'll be a fabric tack down and your quilting. I'll go ahead and move through all of those set to music, and then we'll pick up when we start doing the embroidery detail. Once your background quilting has been stitched, you want to switch to olive green, and you're going to stitch the ornament loop fill. And then when that's done, you're going to switch to red and stitch the ornament cap. Once you've stitched the loop and the cap, switch back to your cream color. We're going to stitch out a fabric placement line for our ornament, and then we'll place our ornament fabric on top. We'll tack it down, we'll trim it, and we'll stitch the decorative outline. This was just like the previous ornaments. Once your decorative outline is stitched, we're going to start stitching the center pinwheel decorations. We're going to start with the pink thread. They're calling that pinwheel 1 fill. Put your pink thread on. Our pink is done. We want to switch to the forest green, and we're going to stitch the pinwheel 2 fill. Once the green is done, switch to the red and stitch the last part of the pinwheel fill. This ornament is done. We'll trim all our blocks at the end. I'm going to go ahead and take this off my machine, and we're going to work on the Christmas tree. We're going to do the Christmas tree block next. Let's go through our threads, and we'll talk about what's in the embellishment kit for this one. We're going to need a sage green. For pink, I'm using the same pink I used on the last block. Then there is a dark green. I have this color to use for dark green. Cream and red, same as last time. This block has a little star at the top of the tree. If you don't have the embellishment kit, you want to get a color for the star on the top of the tree. Pick your color. It charts it as light orange yellow. If you have the embellishment kit, there's a little button. That's what I'll be using. The embellishment kit also has this velveteen to use for the tree. I have my fusible on the back. And then we're going to be using the wash away topping. This is what that looks like. It's a Kimberbell product. I'll link it below. It looks kind of like saran wrap if you've never seen it before. Using this wash away topping when we work with the velveteen, I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece that's going to be big enough to cover that. That way I'm ready to go while we're at our machine. Background quilting for this block is 6.5 by 8.5. You'll need a larger hoop. I'm going to be using an 8 by 12 hoop. I've loaded my light mesh cutaway, hand tighten, screwdriver tighten. Let's go over to the machine. Let's get our files loaded. I know that I need to have a 6.5 by 8.5 background quilting file. If you're following the instructions and using the quilting bundle, you're going to want KDQ 343 Christmas 14 6 by 8 design. I need to find a 6 by 8 quilting design for mine. I already know what I want to use. I want to use the winter design. It has all those pretty snowflakes and swirls. That'll look really good behind the Christmas tree. So I need to find 6 by 8 right there. I'm going to set that design, and then I need to add my Christmas tree on top of that. We are good to go. The background quilting for this block is going to be done in the sage green. I'm going to go ahead and load the green. We're going to go through the same steps. We're going to do our batting placement, place our batting, tack it down, trim it, fabric placement, fabric tack down, and background quilting. I'll go ahead and run all those together to music, same steps we've been doing, and then we'll slow down and start working through the block together. My background quilting is all done. The instructions say to switch to a neutral thread color next. I'm going to put my pink on. Reason being is we're going to stitch the placement line for our trunk fabric, which is pink, and then we're going to tack it down, trim, and stitch a satin outline in pink. So whatever I stitch now for placement and tack down, it's going to be covered by the satin outline. I'm going to go ahead and use pink, but you can always use a neutral thread color if you like. Let's stitch our placement line for our fabric. Got my little placement line for my little trunk and my little piece of trunk fabric. Cover that line, stitch the tack down line, and after you tack it down, trim the outside extra fabric. Once your fabric is tacked down and trimmed, go ahead and stitch the trunk satin outline. My satin outline's done. The instructions again say to switch to a neutral thread. I'm going to do the same thing, kind of like I did with the trunk. I'm going to switch to this dark green because we're stitching the tree placement, the tree tack down, and then the tree satin outline, which is in this color, dark green. I'm just going to go ahead and start with this color. I'm going to stitch my tree placement line. My tree placement line has stitched. I'm going to place my tree fabric, which is the velveteen from the embellishment kit. Now velveteen has a nap. This way is smooth, and if I brush it this way, it's rough. So I'm placing it so if people, touch it, because everybody's going to touch this, it looks fuzzy. When they touch it and run their fingers down, it's going to lie flat. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I cover that placement line. See, I'm not far enough down right there. Make sure I go down far enough. Make sure I'm up far enough here. Plenty of space up top. I'm going to go ahead and add a piece of tape up top. Since this is the velveteen, I only have this piece from the kit. I hope I don't make a mistake. We don't have extra. Make sure it's nice and smooth. And we're going to stitch the tack down line. The tack down line is stitched. You need to trim everything outside of that tack down line. Once you've got your velveteen trimmed, you want to grab that wash away topping. We're going to cover this and tape it. I've got mine taped all the way around. You can do smaller pieces of tape. If you've got wrinkles, it's fine. This does not have to be completely smooth. You're not going to get it completely smooth. Go ahead and put this back on the machine, and we're going to stitch the tree satin outline. Apparently I forgot to hit the button, but you know what it looks like to stitch a satin stitch. My satin stitch has gone all the way around the tree. We need to switch to our cream colored thread, and we're going to stitch the garland detail. One thing you might notice is now this is all nice and flat with no wrinkles. Again, not that it matters, but as it did the satin stitch, it pulled it and tacked it down. Switch to your cream thread and stitch the garland detail. The garland is all stitched out. I'm going to switch to sage green and stitch the holly leaves. Once the leaves are done, switch to your red thread and stitch the holly berries. My leaves and berries are all stitched. For me, this block is done because I'm going to use the star button from the embellishment kit. If you don't have the embellishment kit, go ahead and stitch out the star, then this block is done. I'm going to go ahead and get this off the machine. We'll get rid of the stabilizer and we'll trim it with the other blocks at the end. It's time to do our filler blocks. We're on to our last two blocks, which are the filler blocks. Filler block 1, pink thread, filler block 2, sage green. If you're following the background quilting from the bundle, filler block 1 is KDQ 343 Christmas 14 2x2. Filler block 2, KDQ 346 Christmas 16 2x4. I'm going to show you how to fit both of these in the 5x7 hoop and pick my own quilting designs. Let's load our files and get them both in the 5x7 hoop. I'm going to use the Christmas 3 block by block quilting design with the little Christmas trees. I need a 2x2 and a 2x4. I'm going to load the 2x2, go ahead and set that, and then I'm going to move it to make room for the other block. We've done this before, so edit, move. You can pick it up, drag and drop on my machine, or you can use the arrows. I'm going to hit add, and then I'm going to add the 2x4 block. The 2x4 block needs to be rotated so they'll both fit inside the hoop. I'm going to hit edit and rotate. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees. It's right on top of the other one, so it's going to need to be moved. I'm going to go ahead and move that. Plenty of space in between the two so I can lay down the two different fabrics and two pieces of batting. I can see up here on the top the tiny little hoop that's grayed out is a 4x4. The next is a 5x7. It's still lit up. That means I can get both of these in a 5x7 hoop. We're ready to go. It's going to start with the one that I put on the screen first, which is the small 2x2, which I'm going to use the pink. So I'll go ahead and put the pink on. I could do a neutral thread for the batting placement, tack down, fabric placement, tack down. I'm just going to put the pink on and run through all of these steps, and then I'll switch for the second filler block and put the green on, and it'll run through all the steps for that block. Got my pink thread on. Let's do the first filler block. My first filler block is done. I'm going to switch to green and we'll stitch out our next filler block. Both of my filler blocks are done. We're going to get these out of the hoop and we're going to go trim all of our blocks from today, and then we'll start our borders. I've got my filler blocks, my Ornament 3, and the Christmas tree. We're going to do this one last so I can show you how to remove that water-soluble topping. Let's go ahead and start with our filler blocks. Your filler blocks will be trimmed to the standard size, which for these two is on page 38. We can look down and find our filler blocks. Here's filler block 1 and filler block 2. Filler block 1, standard size, 2.5 inches squared, and then filler block 2, 4.5 by 2.5. More than likely, that's the measurement inside each of the stitch lines. Let's get a ruler and double check. I have a 2.5 inch square ruler. If I lay that down on filler block 1, it lines right up with those stitch lines. For filler block 2, I've got a little square ruler here. I'm going to line this up along the stitch line here and here. 2.5 right on that other stitch line, and then 4.5. So for your filler blocks, if you cut right on those tack down lines, you should have the right measurements. I'm going to go ahead and trim these. Our ornament block needs to be trimmed to 4.5 inches square. If you have the orange pop rulers, you can get your 4.5 inch square orange pop ruler for this one. Line up along those stitch lines and then trim your block. Remember, when you use the orange pop rulers, you want to put your blade here on this side, that would be your left. Push it as far over this way as possible. Your blade will start here and go all the way up to this top notch. So watch your fingers, make sure that they're out of the way. You can place the bigger rulers on the outside for stability. We're on to the Christmas tree block. My tape is still attached. I'm going to go ahead and peel off my tape. I'll actually keep this tape. I'll go put it on a table or a mat or something. It's not super sticky, but I can reuse this again. So if you haven't taken off your tape, go ahead and peel off all your tape. In case you're curious, I wrap my tape around the tape dispenser. That way I won't forget to use it and it'll stay out of the way. I want to get rid of this wash away topping before I trim. Most of it is going to pull right out. If you give it a tug, it just comes right off, especially around the outside. I'm going to start with the stuff on the outside. Done with that. And then I can start on the stuff on the inside. I've got some tweezers here. The more I can pull away, the less chance of me having to get this block soaking wet. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and try and remove as much as I can before I wash away any of the wash away topping. I know that sounds funny, but if I can peel it off, it's easier and then your block is not wet. I've got most of the topping off. Before I get the rest off, I'm going to go ahead and trim my block. If you have the orange pop rulers, you want the middle size rectangle, 6.5 by 8.5, and then you can put the larger one on the outside for stability for your hand. Same procedure as before with the square ruler. Line it up, make sure you're right on those trimming lines, make sure your hand is out of the way, and go ahead and trim your block. Our block is trimmed. I need to get rid of the wash away topping that I couldn't get by peeling it off. I have a bottle of water and a little sponge brush. You can also use a spray bottle, you can use a washcloth, you can use a Q-tip, you can even run it under the faucet if you want. Doesn't matter. I like to do this because it won't get it terribly wet and I can be accurate with where I'm removing the topping and just get that part of the project wet. That's all you need is a little bit of water. And I'm just gently brushing. And I feel like the sponge brush also helps pull it off the fabric. Looks like I got everything. I'm actually going to pick it up and put it under a little magnifying lamp that I have and make sure I didn't miss anything. I've got all the wash away topping off. Looks like I've got a little thread there I need to cut. I was worried about the bobbin thread poking through on this. But you know what? I have the embellishment kit. We're going to be gluing the little rhinestones on top of all these holly berries like we did on the gift block. So they're kind of messy. It's not going to matter. We're also going to put a star on top of this tree. Before I put on those embellishments though, I'm going to set this aside to dry and we're going to quilt our borders. I have my borders cut already, fusible on the back, and I've got some batting scraps to go with the borders. I'm going to show you how I figure out which size hoop and which size files to use for my borders. My fabric strips are 42 inches long. They're with the fabric. I like to do this in as few hoopings as possible. My two biggest hoops are an 8 by 12 and a 9.5 by 14. We're going to do some really simple math. You ready? 42 inches divided by my 12-inch hoop. 3.5 hoopings, which means 4 hoopings. You can't do half a hooping. 42 inches divided by 14, 3 hoopings. This one's really easy. I'm going to use the big hoop. For this big hoop, I have to use the 20 by 10 yards. It doesn't fit this way, but it fits this way. One thing that I've found out is not to center this piece, to kind of pull it like this. So I've got a little bit here, then I'll have more over here. When I'm done and I'm taking the project out of the hoop, I can trim and save this piece to use for another project. And since we're doing the 2 long strips, I don't even have to center them in my hoop. If I want, I can scooch them over to the side, and then I'll have an even bigger piece left over that I can use with my smaller hoops. Let's pick a border file. If you're following the instructions and you have the quilting bundle, you want KDQ 347 Border Christmas 7 1-inch width. That lets me know I need a 1-inch width border file. I'm using my own border files, and I already loaded them with this project, Clear Blue Tiles Border Files. I have loops and I have swirls. Loops is very plain. Let's take a quick look at it. And I would want the block by block. We're not doing clear blue tiles. There's your loop. It's kind of boring. We're not going to do that. Let's back up. Let's go with the swirl. And I'm using my big hoop, which is 14 inches, and I have to do the block by block. If you pick the clear blue tiles, let me just show you that. These are used when your quilt has already been done and you make the quilt sandwich and then you quilt. So we're using the block by block. I need 14 inches long, 1-inch width. 1 inch, 14, right here. I'm going to go ahead and hit set. And remember what I said about moving it over? I'm going to move it over. We'll move it over. Might as well move it over pretty far so I can save that stabilizer for next time. And then we're going to go ahead and duplicate. And I want to duplicate this on the side. This is up and down. This is side to side. I'm going to go back real quick in case you missed me hitting that button. It's this button right here with all the little blocks. Side to side. I'm going to add it on the right. I have to have some space. If you try to move it, you'll notice it moves them both together. What you need to do is use this button here with the arrows pointing out. It's going to go ahead and create the space. Hold it down. That looks pretty good. Then I'm going to move it back over to the side so I can use that extra stabilizer. It'll stop me when I can't go any further. I don't necessarily want it right to the edge of that hoop. A little bit offset will be fine. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And then I'm going to save this to memory. That way if something happens while I'm doing the borders, or if I have to stop and come back the next day, it's already there and I don't have to go through the whole process again. We're ready to start. We'll walk through this together. This is very similar to doing those border fill blocks. We're going to have a batting placement, and you'll see there's two because I'm doing two of them and I duplicated the file. Then we'll have a batting tack down, a fabric placement, a fabric tack down, and then quilting. There's another quilting, it's off the screen. And then we'll be shifting our borders and doing another hooping. I'll show you all of that. I forgot to pull my thread color. It has olive green, which is this color. I don't like that. I laid out some of the other greens. This is the one I'm using for sage green. This is just a generic green. And this was the one I've been using for forest green. It's a question of how much I want the quilting to show. Here's the sage green. There's the green, and the forest green. This is entirely personal preference. I think this is too light. This is okay, it's going to blend. This I like because it's got these touches of the dark green. I'm going to go ahead and use this color for my borders. I've got my dark green thread on that I picked for my borders. I think this is one of the ones I used for forest green. We're going to start with our batting placement lines. You can see the set of placement lines I've got there. Got my strips of batting. Cover your placement line just like you were doing a quilt block. Any extra batting can just hang off the front of your hoop. Don't worry about it. We're going to trim it later. I am going to put a piece of tape at the top. Trying to make sure I don't tape my thread there. Check. That looks good. I'm going to put one more piece down here. Hold it in place. Going to get the next strip of batting, place my next strip of batting. I'm going to put some tape at the top. Make sure I've covered my lines. Bring it to the bottom. Always support underneath your hoop when you're taping things that aren't on a solid surface. You don't want to push and shove your stabilizer down. Good to go here. I'm going to stitch the batting tack down lines. Grab your scissors. Go ahead and cut that off. Keep your extra, cut that off, keep the extra, and then trim all the extra, just like you were doing a quilt block. I've got that all trimmed. If you did what I did and you've got extra stabilizer, just make sure it doesn't get in the way, it's not tucked in underneath. Mine's out of the way. I'm going to stitch my fabric placement lines. Grab your fabric strip and a piece of tape. We want to cover those placement lines. Make sure you go above that top line. And then we'll check it. It's a bit of a tight squeeze. Check it all the way down. Make sure you're covering on both sides. It looks like I'm a little off to one side. When I get to the bottom, I'm going to put a piece of tape all the way across here. The stitching will stop right at that line, so you don't have to worry about any stitching going over your tape. Tape there at the bottom. A little bit of support underneath. I need to make sure that that's smooth. There we go. I'm going to get my next piece of fabric and do the same thing. And now we're going to stitch our fabric tack down lines. Now we're going to stitch out the quilting. If you haven't changed your bobbin lately, check it and make sure it's not almost empty. That way you don't have to pull off a big hoop and change your bobbin. These are all done. We're going to take this off, go to the cutting board, and I'll show you how to prepare for the next hooping. Go ahead and take this out of your hoop. Take off your tape. You want to cut away the excess stabilizer, but we're not trimming these at this time. So you can do this with scissors, rotary cutter. Just trim and get that extra off. I did that piece first. Here's my nice big piece of stabilizer. I can use this in my smaller hoop, so I'm going to fold this up and set it aside and then continue trimming. Now that you've got the extra trimmed, you want to get this little bit here at the end as close to trimmed away as possible. Don't trim your fabric, but get that out of the way. We're going to be lining up for our next hooping, and it'll just cause extra thickness if you don't trim away the extra stabilizer. Set these aside for now. Reload your hoop with your light mesh cutaway and head back to your machine. I'm going to move through the first few steps because they're going to be the same. Batting placement, batting tack down, trim your batting, and then fabric placement line. And then I'll show you how to place your fabric for this hooping. Now that you've stitched out your fabric placement lines, go ahead and take your hoop off the machine. We're going to go over to the table and I'll show you how to line up your borders. Go ahead and grab one of the strips. Here's the quilted part. This part is going to go at the top of the hoop, like this. Fold it over so you've got right sides together. You should be able to see your quilting. And there's a little line right here. That stitch line, we're going to line that up with the line right here. I find this easier to do like this. Then I can roll this back. I can see my line here and my line here. You want those two lines to be right on top of each other. That looks pretty good. What I'm going to do is put a piece of tape here and then double check it. You could also do one big piece of tape across it. It doesn't matter. I just happen to have some small pieces ready. I'm going to flip it back. It looks good. Kind of roll it down, and those two lines are landing right on top of each other, so I know I'm good. Lay this flat, just like you did for the first hooping. Make sure you're covering those placement lines. Check it all the way down, and then put a piece of tape across the bottom. Let's do the next one. I'm going to grab the strip, bring this hoop towards me. Here's the quilting. I'm going to go ahead and put the quilted part up this direction. Fold this, look for that line, match up your two lines. Looks good. I'm going to put some tape down. You can see it's a little crooked. And then we're going to double check. Flip it back. Looks good. And I'll be honest with you, if you don't get this exact, you're not going to be able to notice. I've gotten them really close, but not totally perfect, and it still looks good. Flatten that out. Make sure you're covering your placement lines. Grab your tape. Tape the bottom. We're going to take this over to our machine and stitch the tack down and the quilting. When you're at your machine, make sure these hang off the back. Don't get them caught underneath, and that your extra fabric here is hanging off the front and it doesn't get caught underneath. I'm back at the machine. My two strips are hanging off the back. The extra is hanging off the front. We're going to do our tack down lines and the quilting. The second hooping is done. I'm going to take this to the table, trim it up just like before. Remove your tape, take your project out of the hoop, trim away the excess stabilizer, save your big piece, and we'll put stabilizer back in the hoop again, and we'll set up for our next hooping. Back at the machine, let's move through the first few steps and then we'll line up our final hooping together. Let's get set for our final hooping. Here's where my quilting starts. This is the part I need to quilt. I'm going to start with this side. I'm going to look for that line again. This line, roll it down, line it up. You can also look for your outside lines here. That helps you center it. Just kind of watch all the lines. That looks good. I'm going to put a piece of tape on either side, and then I'm going to look at it just like before. Make sure I've got it in the right spot. That looks good. And when we're all done with the borders, I'll go top to bottom. We'll have a look at it and see how they turned out. You can see here the fabric ends before the end of where it's going to do the quilting. This space is so small, I'm just going to let it quilt off into nothingness. That's fine. I'm going to tape the sides. And I'll keep an eye on this and make sure it doesn't get caught. You can also, you can also tape the bottom. It doesn't matter. It's going to be trimmed off anyway. Let me line up the next one. Let's go over to the machine for our last stitch out. Everything's ready to go. I actually added one more piece of tape because I've been reusing the tape, and when I picked up the hoop to move it, it came off. It wasn't very sticky. Hopefully everything is lined up. Honestly, if it's not, it'll still come out good. We're going to do our fabric tack down and quilting. We're all done stitching our borders. I'm going to go ahead and take this out of the hoop, trim off the excess, and we'll get a close-up look of the stitching and see how I did matching each of the end-to-end joins. Let's take a look at the stitching. It looks pretty good. I think slowing down the machine and using the non-stick needle helps. Let's go to the first join. You can get a look right there, right here, and right here. You can see where they matched up. That looks pretty good. Let's go to the next one. Right there, right there. Again, they matched up really nice. Let's check the second one. Here's the start. Let's just find the join. Looks pretty good. And the second join. I had trouble finding that one right there. Everything looks good. We need to trim our borders. In the instructions for the borders, it tells us after quilting, trim each quilted border piece to its standard size, 1.5 inches wide. If you look at your border and you measure from tack down line to tack down line, it's 1.25 inches, and it tells us to trim these to 1.5 inches, which means you need 1/8 of an inch on either side. For our first project with borders, I just trimmed them on the tack down line and my border ended up being a little bit smaller. This time I'll try adding that 1/8 of an inch. I've got a ruler here that has 1/8 inch markings. What I can do is look for the 1/8, which is right here, and then I need to line up that 1/8 all the way along that stitch line. Not hard, just need to give myself some time to do that. That looks pretty good. So I know I'm cutting 1/8 of an inch away from that tack down, and then I'll cut 1/8 of an inch away from that tack down, which will give me that width of 1.5 instead of 1.25. Let's see how I did. I have a 1.5 inch square ruler. Isn't it cute? Let's put it down. Look at that. I did a good job. I have 1/8 of an inch over on either side, trimmed relatively even. We're going to go ahead and trim the next one. When I was cutting this one, I think I got a little bit off right there, and I did by about 1/16 of an inch. I'm going to mark that because this is a little narrow. When I go to attach this, I want to make sure I account for that when I'm sewing it onto my quilt. I've got a couple of pins. I'm going to take this 1.5 inch ruler. Looks good, looks good. Okay, right about there. It starts to run short. And actually I want to put the pin the other way so I don't poke myself. It's just a placeholder for me. And I can kind of look down and see where it looks good. And then I can start going up again. We're still at 1.5, 1.5. Right about there. I think the rest of my border trimming went well. When I attach this border, I need to watch out for this section. It's time to assemble our quilt. Let's go over the order for assembly. We've got ornament 1 and ornament 2. You'll stitch these together, 1/4 inch seam. I would say press the seams open. When they're stitched together, attach it to the Christmas tree, stitch that, press the seam open. That's the top part of the quilt. You'll stitch ornament 3 to your filler block. Again, just like that, 1/4 inch seam, press the seam open. Then you want to stitch your snowflake, filler block, and snowflake together. So stitch that, 1/4 inch seam, press it open, stitch that, 1/4 inch seam, press it open. Then it will fit next to this Holiday Kisses block. Stitch along there, 1/4 inch seam, and press it open. One thing to look at least for the way I quilted these 2 snowflake blocks, is the pattern. See the little, it's kind of like a star and then a big snowflake. I put the big snowflake out in that corner. And then on this block, here's the big snowflake and here's the little star. That's how I'm going to put them in my quilt. That way they kind of have the big snowflakes up here and the stars in the middle. You can rotate it, have it be the same. I happen to like it like that. Nobody will probably notice, but that's how I'm going to do that. Once you've got the bottom portion put together, you'll put that with your top portion, and then we'll put on our embellishments. Go ahead and get everything sewn together and pressed, and then we'll go over attaching the embellishments. I've got my top together. It's time to measure for our borders. It says to measure through the center. I actually like to measure on the side, the center, and on the other side. It looks like I'm a little crooked across the top here. Let's trim that and even that out before we measure. See how this fabric is above this fabric? I know my seam is straight. I'm going to grab a ruler, line up one of the lines on that seam. Then I'm putting the edge of the ruler right on the white fabric. Make sure this line is straight. I do have extra here on the green. I'm going to trim that off so my border will go on easier. Everything else looks pretty straight. We have a little bit sticking out right here. Do the same thing. You can check your quilt. This is really easy to straighten up. If you don't want to straighten that up, just watch for it as you're attaching your borders and make sure you don't sew out and then in. Grab a tape measure. I have this cute little pink one. I bought it on sale. I couldn't resist, it was pink. Let's measure. Top to bottom down the center, slightly over 14, slightly over 14, and on this side 14. What I'm going to do is check the bottom of my quilt, make sure that that's even. I've got rulers all over the place. You see why? Right here I've got a little bit extra. I'm going to go ahead and grab the other ruler. It's got a longer line here. Line up along that seam, and I've got just a little bit extra right there. Let's check. 14. That's what I wanted to see. Before I get ready to attach my borders, I need to trim off the ends right here and then the other ends, because you have a little extra when you tape it down in your hoop and then it starts quilting. So cut off anything that's not quilted. My edges are clean. I trimmed all the ends. Remember, I have that little section here that I cut short. I'm going to see if I can avoid using this. We have more than enough border. I'm going to start by measuring 14 inches. Not this way because there's not quite enough, but I'm going to go from this end, and then I'll take 14 inches from this end, and I'll sew my side borders on, and then we'll look at top and bottom. I kind of laid it out and played with it a little bit and decided on my best approach. I'm going to trim these to fit the sides, so 14 inches. I'm going to go ahead, sew them with a 1/4 inch seam, press them open. I have my side borders on. These ended up pressing in toward the quilt like this. I was having some difficulty pressing open with all of these other seams, and it pressed easily this way, so I pressed them that way. Let's look at our top and bottom. The instructions have us measure the center, so we'll measure the center. I am just over 12 inches. I'm going to go to the top, just over 12 inches. I'm going to go to the bottom. I am just over 12 inches. That works for me. What I'm going to do is measure my top piece and then my bottom piece. Let me show you something. Here's the piece with no problems. You can see when I lay this out, once I trim it, I have leftover. I may have enough to do both top and bottom from this one piece. I do. Look at that. There's more than enough. I don't even need this piece that has that funny little section. It's kind of a lot of leftover border, but you can make a bookmark out of it, save it for something. I'm going to go ahead and use this piece since this piece doesn't have any mistakes. Since I know my top and my bottom are the same, I'm not going to cut this piece yet. I'm going to take this to my machine, attach that, press it, and then I'll trim it, and then I'll take this piece and attach it and press it, and there'll be a little bit extra and trim it. Here's my bottom border. Let's go ahead and trim that. Make sure everything is even, and then we'll talk about backing and binding. I have a previous video in this quilt along, and I'll link it below, where I go step by step showing how to do the backing and binding. In that video, I also talk about putting the ribbons on for hanging and putting on a label, which is a little tag. I've cut my backing a little bit larger. I'm just going to show you how I lay it out. At this point, you have the option of adding an extra layer of the batting. I don't feel like I need to do one. It's already got batting, it's already quilted. I'm going to go ahead and lay that out like that. Then we're going to do stitch in the ditch. I won't film that because I've done that before. I'll link it below, but I'll show you where I'm going to stitch. Got a nice seam right here. Mine almost matches. So we'll go top to bottom. This seam here along the border. This seam here along the border. Optional, you can stitch right along these as well. It's a small block. I probably will go ahead and do stitching right here just to help tack it down, and then going across I'll do the border here and then under each ornament and the border down here. Pretty simple. I'm going to do that in white, and I'll show you that after it's done. Then I'll put on the binding with my ribbon ties and my tag, and then we'll do the embellishments together. I have everything stitched down. Sometimes it's stitch in the ditch and sometimes it's adjacent. I'll show you what I mean. You can see the white thread is a little bit over to the side. That happens sometimes. You don't see it when it's hanging and on display. I'll show you the back. You can see where my stitching is. I'm going to trim away the extra backing fabric. I have my ribbons ready for my hanging ties. That video is linked below. I have my binding ready. I've got this color. This is a 30 weight cotton thread. This color matches really well to the binding. I'm going to go with that. And then I've got one of my labels that I'm going to write on. And again, everything about the binding and the ribbons and the label, it'll be in the video linked below. After I have all of that done, we'll come back, we'll attach our rhinestones and our star. I've got the binding on. It looks great. I'm glad I measured these borders correctly this time and I didn't cut them too short, too skinny like the last time. I need to get my button for the top of my tree, and then we've got our little sparkles. I showed in detail on one of the previous quilts, the one with the little gift, how I attach these with toothpicks and E6000. I'm going to do the same thing here. And normally I would get my glue gun and glue gun this, but since it's the only button, I'm just going to use the E6000. This is a clear glue. It dries clear. It's great for jewelry. It does tell you to allow 24 hours for curing and 72 hours for full curing. Everything is done. We've got all of our little sparkles and our star glued down, our binding on, my ribbons are on the back. It looks great. The best way to see it is like this, because as soon as I turn it like this, we're missing half of it. Although let's get a good close-up of it. Thank you for joining me again for the Quilty Little Christmas Quilt Along. We just finished Quilty Wishes. We've got one more project left. The week of August 29th, I'm going to work on the gingerbread cookies. It's the smallest of the quilts right here. I hope you'll come back and join me for that, and we'll finish out our gallery wall collection. Also coming in September. Get ready. We're going to work on this one. Get your fabric. Get your supplies. This was on sale. I know this is an older Kimberbell quilt, but I never made it. I'll be posting the schedule soon. Thank you again for joining me. Please like, subscribe, and share. As always, any questions or comments, leave them below for me. I read them all. I look forward to seeing you back here August 29th, where we'll work on our gingerbread cookies mini quilt. Thanks for watching. See you next time.